Well, it's on to the next stepping stone. That's what I'm calling them now, because they indeed have been stepping stones through these timelines that the Lord is leading us through. So on the morning of November 30th, and I know a lot of people were hoping that that would be a special day, even though I kept pushing it off until the early mornings of December 1st as the earliest God would do something, because he has to complete that day that a prophecy is assigned to. That's normally how he does things, in my estimation, from my knowledge of the Word. And I wasn't all that confident that anything was going to happen either on November 30th or December 1st. But a lot of people were pushing it because they thought that things had to wrap up before the end of November because of certain moon phases, and people had come across dreams of other people suggesting such, not necessarily demanding that, but it kind of suggested it in the narrative that these things had to wrap up before November. Well, I've come to understand that don't hold your breath on those things. And then there was that we will meet halfway in the middle. I mean, even Kenny Loggins recorded an incredible song to that end. I'm sure he wasn't dialed into end time events, but God was giving that song to a number of people. Beautiful song. Go look it up, YouTube it. So there seemed to be a heavy emphasis on November 30th and December 1st before that crescent moon phase was no longer crescent, and we had a Fibonacci curlicue cutting right through that, going right down to the eye of God, the Helix Nebula. In other words, there was plenty of bling bling in front of us to get us focusing on those 2 days, and specifically those 2 days and nothing else. Well, that's been the learning curve. I wonder how many times the children of Israel thought, well, this is the last time around this mountain, and then it's off to the promised land. And the bottom line for me personally was, well, I just ain't feeling it for November 30th or the 1st of December. But that didn't mean I stopped watching and looking and hoping something would manifest. Well, something did, and turned out to be God kind of getting ahead of me a little bit and getting me ready for the next stepping stone. I just didn't know it at the time. So what happened was, came out of a deep sleep, opened my eyes, looking right at the face of my red LED clock, 11:11. Here we go again. So I grabbed my phone to take a picture of it, which I sometimes do, just to encourage myself, and I was still half asleep. So I decided instead to take a picture of it because I wanted a screenshot of 11:11:11 because I can get it to where I can bring that number across the whole screen, and the background that I have currently dialed in is that G299 nebula that sits right below Argos and Centaurus. And what I was going to do is I was going to send it to a friend of mine who had a vision of something like that and kind of say, hey, here it is. Was it something like this? And to steal some of my thunder from later, yeah, it was. But when I went to shoot this thing, something happened. And this is what I got. And the crazy thing is, I don't know how I got that, and I've never been able to reproduce that since that. Look at the last two numbers and the two dots. They dropped down behind the first two 11s. So I have an 11:11 and a drop down 11. Totally weird. I actually deleted the screenshot because I wanted something better for my friend. And I just thought, I muffed this one up. I'll just delete it and hopefully it'll happen again someday. So this deleted screenshot is in the trash file on my phone. So the next morning, December 1st, where we were really directly in the middle of the two red swords, which would be a cool fulfillment of I will meet you halfway in the middle. And here James comes up with, I'll meet you halfway on the cross. I mean, people are coming up with this stuff. What am I supposed to do with it? I'm supposed to do something, so I did. The exact middle was early mornings of December 1st, which was completing November 30th on the International Dateline West. And again, I'm not feeling it. I'm just thinking the spirit is just totally quiet. I'm not being moved on anything. I'm going, okay, this was another stepping stone, which is, painful, disappointing, and I'll just have to wait and see what new breadcrumbs come my way in the next few hours. And waiting for me was a post that Sarah Starchild left on the comment section to the last video. And here, let me put it up for you. And you tell me what you see. Well, the first thing she says is, well, this is a dream. I'm walking down the hallway. I've got my cell phone in my hand, And then I look up and I see this number, 1/11/1111, and a drop down 1:11. Now tell me, does that look like anything that you just looked at about 20 seconds ago? Here, let me put them side by side and see if that paints a clearer picture for you, because it was very clear for me. I mean, I was in a deep dive panic. What did I do with that picture that I took the day earlier? I had to dig it out of the trash bin. There it was. Now you're looking at it. Look, you can't make this stuff up. And I would not know where to begin to try to Photoshop that 11/11/11 on my screenshot. And why would I? I mean, what Sara came up with was a day later. It's not like I planned this out. These things happened on their own. And what I come away with is, yeah, there's going to be another stepping stone. Here's the confirmation. And here Sara did a real cool thing. She dialed into Google January 1st, 11/11. And this is what comes up. A person born on that date would be 911 years old on this day. Not 3 months from now or 7 months past, on this day, 911. You would be 911 on this day. Again, family, you can't make this stuff up. And that 911 stuck in my head because she had seen it in many previous dreams as well as many other dreamers. 911 or 11/9. And the thought, I get these thoughts, I got to chase them down. What if it's 9 and then 11? Two different numbers. Because when it's one number, 911, that can relate to 11/11 because November, in the calendars back in Jesus' day, November was the 9th month, not the 11th. So 911, the 11th of November. As it is today, 11/11. But here I'm thinking, what about 9 affecting something to where we get that 11? And I knew what I had to do. And it was Fibonacci time. And I thought, what if there are other applications, and I just learned this a couple days earlier, other applications than the first and second and now a third Fibonacci pattern that when applied gave us some very specific and very expected dates and signs and wonders in the heaven. We found 3 of them. What if there was a couple before and even some ahead of us yet? Because I've had people accusing me on YouTube that, well, he assigned one Fibonacci curve and look what they came up with, a rapture date, and they were wrong. Well, no, that's not what happened. We were finding the dates for signs and wonders on God's timeline, and they came to pass. And I wish these accusers on YouTube would actually watch and discern the videos so they don't have to make such incredibly inept accusations, because they are bearing false witness to what was actually said. And bearing false witness, well, that's a bad thing, especially if we are being led of the Spirit to come up with this stuff, because they're not just bad-mouthing this ministry, they're bad-mouthing the anointing of God's Spirit, and that doesn't go well. But that is to be expected because that is the natural course of things in this arena of jumping from one stepping stone to the next, to the next, to the next, as the Lord is leading us through this wilderness. So I went back and decided, well, this all started with Roche's dream or vision, I think it was a vision in this case, of the partial solar eclipse. And now we have better understanding of Olive Branch's dream, where she had those 3 moons, the first being the moon with the butterfly in it. And that's all pointing back to that partial solar eclipse and or that moon phase. So I thought, what would happen if I plugged in that Fibonacci pattern, that curlicue, for a 4th attempt and see where it comes out? Well, there you're looking at it. And it comes out right on Orion. And Orion, when the moon is in that vicinity, well, on the day that it almost conjoins with a retrograding Mars, that's November 11th, 11/11. So even before this all started and we started doing the Fibonacci thing and finding all the characters and the constellations and the nebulas and the galaxies that are all being exposed and identified as this blue butterfly is dancing forward as the moon, and giving us all these incredible signs and wonders in the heavens as God is bringing forth. That's what it says in Job 38:32, where God said only he can bring forth, or birth the Mazzaroth. That's the constellations and the nebulas and the galaxies. He brings forth the Mazzaroth in its season. Well, it's been coming forth, and we can see that everything is interpreted as Christ in the heavens. And I mentioned that in the last video. Christ is Orion. Christ is the Ram. He is the holder of Libra, the balances of justice. He is Sagittarius. He is Taurus the bull. He is the sun. He is those galaxies. Everything's pointing to Christ as these types are being played out. And here, before we even started getting into the Fibonacci code, it was actually in play at the very start. The start when the blue butterfly was made manifest in these dreams that people are having, especially Roche, starting at that partial solar eclipse. So like I said, I dialed in the Fibonacci golden ratio curlicue, comes right down through Orion, 1111 or 911. And yet we just found this eye of God going through these stepping stones. That was November 30th. That's where the moon was, right above the left leg of Aquarius, and on the left knee of Aquarius is the nebula Helix, which is called the Eye of God. Then I remembered, well, the last time the moon was on the knee of Aquarius, it was on the 9th of the 7th Hebrew month. The 7th Hebrew month was this November. So the 9th Hebrew day of this month was November 3rd. And right before it went into that living stream of water from Aquarius, it was right over that Eye of God, the Helix Nebula. It's just back then we didn't know about it because we had not identified at that time the Helix Nebula or many of the players. We were just learning all these things. Like I said, this is a learning curve. It's a learning process. So I kind of felt compelled, let's go back to that November 3rd, 2022, and let's plug in the Fibonacci golden ratio curlicue pattern on that day. And this is what it produced. And you'll see as it swings around and heads up, it goes through Aquila, the eagle constellation, kind of right by that Delphinius dolphin constellation, which in earlier days was known as Job's coffin. It goes by this arrow, upper right-hand corner, in the constellation Sagitta, and that'll have incredible meaning here shortly. Then it curves down, it goes through Mars and through Betelgeuse. Now, in an earlier dream received by Sara Starchild, she was dealing with this number 124 and 136, but she said, I think it was something to do with, and the name was given her, Sagitta, Sagitta, and she talked about an arrow. And I thought, no, that's the arrow of Sagittarius. I had no clue what Sagitta was or what it meant at that time. But look at that arrow. It's almost touching the line. And I whipped up this Stellarium screenshot and threw the pattern on there, not knowing how things would line up. But like earlier in the day, I thought, I bet that's going to go right through that arrow. And what she saw was that arrow constellation, Sagitta. I mean, look how it's positioned. It's pointing at the curve. It's almost touching the curve. And this was her 124 number. She came up with a star, WR124. And if you look it up on Stellarium, it actually looks like a nebula, a red nebula. And that is what it produced. There's far too many points of contact on this curlicue pattern to dismiss it. This is spot on. This is confirmation. And then the next step then was to see what would happen when the moon was in Aquarius, either on its hip or on its knee. On its left hip, it's directly over the Helix Nebula, the Eye of God. And what I come away with, as far as the typology, with God putting that Helix Nebula there, is that he's kind of like saying, look what I see. Here's the Eye of God. I'm looking at something with the Eye of God, and I'm pointing at it with the Fibonacci countdown pattern, the fingerprint or the finger of God. I'm looking at it. I'm pointing at it. So if God is looking at something and pointing at something at the same time, at the same location, well, maybe it has great significance. So that's where I dialed the Fibonacci curve on, was on that position of the moon on November 29th. You're looking at it. Well, check out where this Fibonacci countdown pattern treks through. it plows right through the Eagle constellation, right through the Dolphin Job's Coffin constellation, comes down, goes right through Mars, the god of war, right to Betelgeuse. And let us not forget what Jesus said would be the sign of the season of his return. Something about this big explosion setting off a great illumination, a flash of brightness from one side of heaven to the other side of heaven, heading from east to west, which can only be a supernova. And in those two passages of Luke 17 and Matthew 24, he states, where the corpse is or where the body is, the eagles shall gather. Well, we got an eagle and we got a coffin. And what do you put in coffins? Corpses. So where the body or the corpse is, the eagles shall gather. And the last time that happened was on 9/19, the number God had been giving me for the last year or two. And on September 19th, 9/19, they had a funeral for a queen where all the eagles of the nations attended. Where the body is, the eagles shall gather. So this may be suggesting that this is going to happen again, just a different dignitary. And it has something to do possibly with the god of war, Mars. And an interesting note that we can add to all this, Mars is going to be in that location that you're looking at right now during the full moon here on the 7th of December. And if my memory serves me correct, December 7th is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. That's what got us into the war in the Pacific, World War II. Apply the law of coincidences. And many of these dreamers have been seeing war in the month of December. And some were talking about a kickoff started by this great ball of fire explosion in the heavens sometime in around then. But the words being used is kickoff. And New York was added to that scenario, added to that narrative. Just happens to be a NFL football kickoff on December 4th between the home team, the New York Giants, and the Washington Commanders. And I certainly would not put it past the Lord to dial something like that in to emphasize his message. And one other note, dealing with the dreams and visions that Sara Starchild had, in a number of her dreams, she kept running into this Thursday man. This guy does everything on Thursday. And he's associated with the red sky and judgment things. Well, December 7th is followed by December 8th. That's a Thursday. At least it will be in Jerusalem, which would be an interesting fulfillment of her dream if that came to pass. And by dialing this in, the way I just expressed to you these last few minutes, we came up with some other numbers that could potentially fulfill the other dreams that Sara Starchild had, as well as those God gave Roche. It's just it would take way too long to get into, and I am too spent to make that attempt. There comes a point where people have to get into this on their own, and they have to learn to be led of the Spirit, and they have to learn to hear from the Spirit, and then they get to make their own mistakes on their own time and not be subject to all my mistakes. But I do walk away from this with five Fibonacci patterns, when applied, give us specific signs and wonders in the heavens as proven out through the eyes of Stellarium. How God chooses to fulfill those in real time, well, that's why he makes the big bucks. That's his prerogative, how he wants to do that. And right now, it's been nothing but stepping stones, giving you and giving this world time to come into a deeper relationship with him. But that time, at some point, will run out, and he will pull the trigger. And at that time, you're either on the ark or you're not. Just ask all those people in the days of Noah how that went for them. It only went well for those that were in the ark of safety, as in the days of Noah. So let me take you back to where this all started, and that was with my screenshot of 11:11 with that last colon and 11 dropped, and what Sara Starchild posted in the comment section about all those ones that she saw and the pattern she saw it in. Let me do just a little bit of creative mathematics and just add a little bit of embellishing, and guess what I came up with? When you add all those ones up in that dream that she saw, it comes out to, as it were, 8:11. Now I had a shorter screen to work with, so I multiplied mine. I came up with 8:11. And if we consider that to be as a date described with the Hebrew calendar, that would be the 8th Hebrew month, the 11th day. That's December 4th. That's kickoff day for those who are dialed into this exploding ball of fire, kicking off God's end time events. This was one of the downloads I had just last night, which had my brain chewing on it for a couple hours, and it might not mean anything. Could be too much pizza the night before, but there is that law of coincidence, so at least I took a look at it. Tell you one thing, if something happens on December 4th or 5th, well, then there's a 3-day countdown from December 4th to 5th to that December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, the anniversary of the Day of Infamy. So that's the next stepping stone. I'm saying from December 4th to the full moon of December, that being around the 7th and the 8th of December, because that is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, the day that started the war for us in the Pacific. There, the numbers are yours. You've got plenty to look at. You got numbers to crunch. You got dots to connect. And you have a loving Lord you can take this to, who will work it through with you, along with Team Jesus and other members of the body, that you may prepare your heart for his return. Because everything so far in this last month or two is showing that it is imminent. It's happening. I still think it's going to happen before the close of the year. And all you have to do is look around you and see how this world is crumbling, and that should tell you something if none of what I just presented to you tells you anything. Now, I just asked Sara Star Child to publish a dream concerning Jonah, and I will supply that link in the description box of this video. Because on the second half of that dream, she saw what I consider to be the partial solar eclipse of October 25th. And to the left of this eclipse, I'm going to say that's the Lord, or the Lord working through this ministry, and a voice told her, or told this ministry, to whomever that instruction was being given to look to Jonah. And I requested that of her because of this posting someone left in the comment section for the last video. Hey, are we in the belly of the whale? That would be the constellation Cetus. And sure enough, we are, or we were, when he posted that comment. That was from Jaybird839. And that gave me another breadcrumb. Because if there's someone standing to the left of that parade that started with that partial solar eclipse, and there's something Jonah involved, and that there is a constellation that represents Jonah and the whale, then I conclude that we are going to go past that constellation, or the bride would, of course, and according to Stellarium, the moon does not come out of the constellation Cetus until about the 4th or 5th of December. And here you have a wonderful example how God is using different members of the body, Team Jesus, as an avenue to provide us with these breadcrumbs which identify the next stepping stone. And Star Child received this dream around November 17th, it looks like. So God is being faithful to, as it were, illuminate the path and provide us with those breadcrumbs, with those clues, to keep us on that path and to keep us encouraged to continue on that path and use that time to prepare our hearts. I mean, how cool is that? Now here I have up on the screen the drawing that James did, and he was dialing in the 30th of November as that halfway point where Jesus was going to meet us in the middle. And I was convinced of that too. But since we're past that middle, maybe there is something else we need to take a little bit deeper look into. The Lord never said what middle he was talking about. James mentioned in the middle of the cross. I had a number of crosses in my decoding of the moons and tetras. And in these butterfly dreams, we had 2 red crosses. Made sense to me. Go between the 2 red crosses. Well, there may be a significant better rendering of that. And it has to do with the eye of God and the finger of God. Remember, he was pointing at the 30th of November, which is right over the eye of God. So in a sense, according to typology, God is looking at that date and he's pointing to it, both looking at it and pointing to it. Now, if that were the day we start the countdown for that in the middle, and that timeline would run to the next red sword, where we got that straight alignment from Polaris on down to Argos, giving us that red sword, well, that alignment will be realized on the 14th of December. And what's halfway between the 30th of November, or if we can extend it a little bit into the morning of the 1st of December, well, that's 14 days between that eye of God, finger of God, and that red sword alignment from Polaris straight down. That's December 7th. Oh, isn't that one of the dates we were just talking about? December 7th? That's halfway. And for many, many months, I've heard a lot of watchmen on the wall and dreamers make the statement, when we go up, all hell comes down. Or vice versa. All hell comes down, we go up. It's happening at the same instance. So if you're listening to this, my request is go back and crunch the numbers. My recommendation is do not use the Torah calendar. That is a very bad calendar. We should all be using the calendar that God gave Moses. And that calendar was revealed and restored this year, that being the first day of the year, Rosh Hashanah, was May 2nd. And every first day of the month is determined by the naked eye, that first visible crescent. I'm curious what those new calculations would provide us. And this is why it's so critical. We know what a first day of a Hebrew month is. We know what the first day of the first month of the year is, and that we don't use solar calendars to figure out either of those. God used the moon specifically for determining his appointed times, his feast dates, his convocations. And if anybody wants to go into any depth of that, the teaching can be found on my YouTube channel in a 2-part series with an introduction called Passover, Pentecost, and the Seventh Day Weekly Sabbath Lost. We got to get on the right calendar, because most of us are not. And I learned it the hard way by going through face plants until I finally figured out I was on the wrong calendar. Anything coming from the Hebrew religious community is most likely messed up. Anything coming from the historic Christian church that copies or mimics or utilizes the traditional calendars are messed up. And I'm not privy to the calculations that James came up with these dates. I'm just very thankful that he supplied that Fibonacci golden sequence, because that blew this stuff wide open. That unlocked everything. I am so grateful, but we're on a learning curve. And I really want to know, was this "we will meet in the middle" thingy that has come from many sources? I want to know if that's of God or not, because right now it's not looking too good. But if we dial in the eye of God and the finger of God pointing on that date, well, the middle is December 7th. So I'm correcting on that for me personally, and this will probably all be a moot point if something doesn't happen between December 4th and the 7th. So welcome to the arena of prophecy. And it appears that the only time prophecy really works is when you're looking at it with 20/20 hindsight. This has not been a fun journey, but it has been a necessary journey. That is, if he's going to restore his appointed times, his covenant dates, and his convocations. So I'm thinking we're looking at least at December 4th to that next stepping stone, possibly up into the full moon of December. Do you remember the dream by Crystal Blayton where she saw this moon folding in on itself in kind of a vertical orientation, and next to it she saw another moon? Well, that moon folding in on itself, that is an eclipse. It's phasing in and phasing out. The moon to the right of it is the next month's moon phase. And then she sees this circular pink cloud somewhere in the mix. And if you look real close, it looks like the Fibonacci pattern. Just saying. So even back when she had that dream, God was pointing to something. And when you connect all these different dreams, well, looks like sometime after the whale, the constellation Cetus, and sometime in that moon phase of December. You see, it's been there all along. It's just that we got to figure out this God language, the language of the constellations, the moon, the sun, and the signs and wonders in heaven. Not an easy language to learn. And I'll leave you with this posting this young lady left in the comment section. It was actually the second time. And it ministered to me the first time so much that I went back to look at it, and the thing disappeared. I could not find it. I looked and looked and looked. And here in just the last couple of days, she posted it again. And I was so thankful, because I kind of read it wrong the first time. And she stated that the Lord spoke to her and said, the ballroom is in Stellarium. Here's a shot of it. And I originally read that to mean like the Super Bowl would be in Stellarium. This competition, this game where everybody's finally going to get into Stellarium and they're going to go at it and they're going to come up with different things and hopefully it would all gel and come together. That's not what was said. So when she reposted it, I read it and it said, the ballroom is in Stellarium. And I misread it a second time. I thought it was like, oh, that's where the wedding banquet's going to be, in the ballroom. Oh, I need to go to Stellarium and see if there's something about, a ballroom, a wedding banquet, something. It's wedding banquet. And that's not what it said. And the Lord had to kind of tap me on the shoulder a couple times. And he goes, what do you do in a ballroom? You dance. The dance is in Stellarium. That's what he was saying to this young lady who was sharing it with the readers by putting that in the comment section. And that is exactly what was happening. And I remember the last few words I said in the last video is, welcome to the dance of the black and blue butterfly. Like I said, that's what we've been doing. We've been dancing across the skies, going from stepping stone to stepping stone to stepping stone. It's a dance. It's a process. And I'll give it to you one last time. Welcome to the dance of the black and blue butterfly. And I'll put on the end of this video what I have ordained, as it were, to be the official dance or waltz music to that dance. And Sarah Starchild was the one who got me hooked on this beautiful musical piece, and I'll leave it at the end. I call it the dance of the black and blue butterfly. Maranatha.